I swear I'm almost done talking about ARMS. The last couple of videos we've been really focused on it because I really want to do something to help grow the competitive ARMS community and get more people playing because there's still so much ARMS left to play. But as I've been making these videos, I've thought to myself, wait, I'm just a guy with no clout. I can't just throw up a huge event like Mogul Chess Boxing and pull a Ludwig. How am I supposed to get people playing? So yeah, that's what we're researching today. How do fighting game communities grow and more importantly thrive? Before we start looking into that, let's take a look at where we are now, what the goal is, and what we're missing. Hey there, my name is BrettWils. This is actually a video about Smash Bros. Melee, and it's my goal to grassroots the competitive ARMS scene into something great. What can that end up looking like though? In 2024, the current largest FGC tournament is EVO, and there are two separate events, EVO USA and EVO Japan. This is the in-game of recognition for fighting games, as every year top players from all the major fighting games compete. Street Fighter, Tekken, King of Fighters, Guilty Gear, Smash Bros. Melee, even ARMS one year at EVO Japan. That one was a big push by Nintendo to get it included, by the way. And they all come together not just for a prize pool, but because of genuine love of the game. But there's just one problem with that. EVO 2024 doesn't even have Melee in its lineup this year. But why? Melee actually hasn't been a part of EVO since 2018, and it was most likely a decision based on logistics. Melee was by far the oldest game in the lineup, and while the Melee scene is massive, lugging around and organizing old CRTs is a huge pain and hassle for setups that are only going to be used for one game. Plus, Melee is a very different game from its peers also on show like Tekken or Street Fighter, so there isn't really that much overlap for viewers. Of course though, if CRTs are going to be mainly the issue, then surely we can have Ultimate in EVO, right? If it's the latest Smash game, also with a huge scene because it's on the Nintendo Switch, and it can use the same monitor setups as everything else, right?
That question has finally been answered on February 26th, when EVO put out a statement on Twitter confirming that the series will not be making a return appearance.
Yeah, so about that. Back in 2021, Sony Interactive Entertainment and a talent agency by the name of Endeavor acquired EVO fully, and the following year Nintendo pulled out of the event completely. I don't really see it all that likely that we get a Nintendo game at EVO ever again, as Nintendo would prefer to not promote their product at an event owned by a competitor. Honestly, it's a really dumb business mindset in my opinion where nobody actually gets to win, and the only people that lose are the fans and competitors themselves. So with that being said, the end goal of EVO is out. The world's largest fighting game stage is not an option for recognition for any single Nintendo game ever again. Fans of other communities, rejoice though. Prior to researching this video, I'd never heard of Under Night and Birth 2 Sis Celeste, so good for you guys. Of course though, a company can just throw some money behind any of their games and brute force it into the limelight. Take a look at League of Legends World Championships for example. Riot Games spares no expense at hosting a big premium event for its flagship game, which also happens to be the largest esport in the world. League's 2024 mid-season invitational alone brought in 2.8 million viewers, and it's still only the 6th most highly viewed League broadcast ever. That's absolutely wild, and it's not even the main show. Although, that doesn't always work. A really good example of this was the Overwatch League, which was founded in 2017 and ended up folding 7 years later in 2024. This was Activision Blizzard's attempt at creating a large esports scene for their game Overwatch. Initially, the league started out with a framework that was really similar to sporting events like football or basketball that had franchise teams. Long story short, over the years, the league didn't do well as Overwatch was left stagnant while we waited for Overwatch 2's release. Lost a lot of money and eventually was rebranded into the Overwatch Championship Series, opening the format to allow outside esports orgs like TSM or Fnatic to compete and manage their own teams, similar to the League World Championships. Overall, I think that was the right move, but ultimately time will tell. So there I was, writing the script. Dejected, I could no longer get one of my favorite fighting games onto the world stage with tens of other ARMS fans cheering. I'm just a guy. I have no clout. I have no money. I was at a loss. this wasn't the plan at all. As I sat there meditating about my next move, that's when I had an epiphany. If you cannot buy the plant, you must grow the roots. To understand what that means, I've got to take you on a little trip to Northern California, way back in the year of 2002, so we can pay a visit to Matt Deasy's house. Super Smash Bros. Melee had released the previous year on November 21st, 2001. In that first year, people were already in the labs discovering tech like wave dashing, dash dancing, and L canceling, but there weren't too many organized tournaments popping up. That is, until Matt Deasy did something incredible. He hosted a tournament at his house. On April 6, 2002, Deasy hosted what he called Tournament Go, a small competitive tournament for Melee. And when I say small, I mean small. The numbers aren't exactly known, but going off of what we know from Tournament Go 3 and that there were doubles played, there were anywhere between 7 to 50 people. And that was it. That was the start of Melee as a competitive game. Tournament Go continued up until Tournament Go 6 on the weekend of August 21st. With each successive tournament growing until Tournament Go 6 had over 100 competitors across both singles and doubles. And this was still at his house, by the way. There was no fancy venue, no financial backing, no Nintendo approval. Just a bunch of people showing up at some guy's house to play a game that they all loved and wanted to be the best at. From there, other Melee events started popping up like Melee FC and Game Over in other parts of the country. Eventually, Major League Gaming caught wind of the scene and hosted its own circuit, culminating in MLG New York 2004 on October 24th, bringing with it the golden age of Melee. Despite that, things got rough with the release of Super Smash Bros. Brawl, where that game had largely overtaken Melee and became the face of competitive Smash because it was the newer game. Yet, Melee persisted, again because of one man getting people together. This time, it wasn't Deasy, but a competitive Melee player by the name of Alucard who hosted the Revival of Melee tournament in New York in March of 2009. EVO and Major League Gaming had Brawl on their roster, sure, but the Melee community wanted to play Melee, and that's what they did. They never let it go, continuing instead with their own events like Genesis in 2009 and Pound 4 in 2010. From there, because people still played Melee, showed they played Melee, and still played Melee, the scene kept growing and is to this day still growing. From day one, the Melee scene never needed any support from Nintendo or larger organizations to help with creating tournaments or growing the scene. All they needed was a guy, a house, and some people to play the game. And it doesn't even have to be a house. My local Ultimate scene literally meets once a week on Saturdays in a random coffee shop downtown because they worked with the coffee shop so that it wouldn't just be a bunch of sweats taking up real estate, but so we're encouraged to buy from the place. Any tournament where I can buy a coffee instead of paying a venue fee is a good scene for me. And that's in current day 2024. Of course, my weekly Ultimate scene is still thriving. Back in 2020, when COVID-19 shut down in-person events, Ultimate could still thrive because it had built in online play, which still allows tournament organizers to run events safely and remotely. So people can still play and the scene can still grow, especially while people have more time on their hands than ever. Melee didn't exactly have that luxury though. It was a game released on the Nintendo GameCube, and while the console did have an optional accessory that gave it an Ethernet port, which did provide online play functionality, but it was only used for Phantasy Star Online, Melee didn't get that option. Surely, if anything would kill Melee, it would be that, right? Like, what are you gonna do? Emulate an Endolphin because some really smart Melee fans work together to improve the netplay functionality and add in rollback netcode so that the online experience is as close to the in-person experience as possible? Because that's exactly what they did. Project Slippy is essentially a custom Dolphin build that aimed to give the Melee scene a few quality of life updates to the game, like automatically saving replays and match statistics. And it had been in development since 2018, but the big update came on June 22nd, 2020. With in-person tournaments being closed down in March of 2020, there was truly nowhere to just play Melee until this update implemented rollback netcode and integrated matchmaking, meaning that you could play Melee any anytime, any day, anywhere, get an opponent and battle it out, making getting into Melee more accessible than ever, and the distance didn't matter. This was as close to an in-person experience as you can get, and so online tournaments started popping up en masse. This allowed Melee to not just thrive during a time where everyone was stuck inside, but also grow, because fewer people had to go out of their way to buy a $100 copy of Melee. You could finally just play. 19 years after release, Melee still refused to die. Melee persisted. Nowadays, Melee is facing its new big challenge. When it comes to watching it live, that's really dependent on who's running that particular event, and Melee players largely don't know when they're happening, with broadcast and event schedules not being posted well ahead of time, and live broadcasts being scattered around both top players and the organization's own channel, leading to a fractured viewer base and a smaller online presence than when a majority of orgs were going through VG Bootcamp, a central broadcast pillar for everything Melee. And yet, despite that, Melee will still persist just as it always has. Like always, someone from the community will, in some way, find a solution to fix the current problems the scene has in order to make it more accessible, viewable, and enjoyable. So, in short, yes, a large game developer can absolutely throw money at a competitive game to create a scene and get eyes on the game. That's not a problem. But I don't think that's the best way to make a game eternal in the eyes of its players and audience. Melee has persisted for 23 years, not because of Nintendo backing the game, not because it's a game that's easy to play and set up, and certainly not because it has every major FGC tournament willing to put it on stage. Because when it comes to in-person events, Melee doesn't have any of that. It's 2024, and Melee continues to persist in spite of all of that because people just really love getting together to play Melee. The passion and genuine love of the game is what allows Melee to stay eternal. That love of the game and people willing to play it is the only thing any game needs to become a persistent, highly loved esport. All it needs is some dirt and hard work for the grassroots to grow, and there will be people, anyone, can be Matt Deasy and lay down the roots. And in the near future, I'll have something I want to announce when I get everything ironed out. So make sure to subscribe and join the Discord for more information on that as soon as it happens. But I really just want someone to beat me to it. The Ohio TOs for the ARMS community have been doing a stellar job at hosting bi-weekly tournaments through the bi-weekly procrastination series ever since 2017. And they're still going strong. But wouldn't it be cool if there were more events? I don't think that burden should be on them alone, even if they're doing it exceptionally well. Yes, my focus right now is on ARMS and building those roots up. That's why I made this trilogy of videos to pique your interest. But if you're watching this video isn't about my love of ARMS as a competitive game. No, what this video is a history lesson on how, despite everything going against it, Melee still grew and became the giant it is today. And it all started with a tournament at some random guy's house in Northern California. And you can do that with your game too. It doesn't matter what it is. Feel free to let me know in the comments what that game is for you, and then I think it's time we get out there and lay down some